This is B's house. And B's house is going through, well, renovation. Okay, so, and that includes painting the door that was red in blue. Okay, so now we're going to look into why that is. Why does B intend to repaint his door that was red in blue? Okay, so through today's story, we're going to look into why that is. Okay, so welcome back. Mary Kay, welcome back. And hello, welcome back. Yes, coffee is like air. Essential. Okay. And 감사합니다. Okay, so now, of course, as always, yes, B is the dramatic one, the unpredictable one, A is the more common collected one, and C is usually the professional one, right? Okay, so that's going to be the theme for today as well. Okay, so I said B's house is going through renovation. Now, is B going to do everything himself? Of course not. B called C. So C is a person, is a professional. So C was hired to fix B's house in a lot of ways. Okay, so once again, what does that mean? C is going to be speaking professional Korean because C is someone who was hired as a professional to come here to renovate B's house. Okay, so C will start today's conversation, but you know what I'm going to say, right? Because C is working, C is going to play a completely different game. So called professional Korean, not spoken Korean. So don't speak like C. The only reason why C can speak like this is because we know that C is working. So that's the only reason why C can speak like this without sounding extremely awkward or even poetic. Okay, so, and moreover, the format will be in honorifics version number 1. What is honorifics version number 1? A way of speaking in which your sentences usually end with 니다 or 니까. Once again, honorifics version number 1 is not used for spoken Korean, but it can be used for professional/business Korean. Okay, so now B specifically asked C to paint the door in blue. Yes, it used to be red, but now it's going to be blue. So C said, okay, we'll do that. And then C comes back and says, well, we, the people who were hired to renovate B's house, we painted it, of course, the door. Now in Korean, we're going to say it like this. We painted it with the color blue. Okay, so let's break down the structure of the 문장, the sentence. Of course, we're talking about we, the people who are working here, and of course, we were talking about painting the door. So of course, I'm talking about it, the door, and no articles, no us and does. Okay, so what do we have? We have supplementary information, just like because of something, like something is supplementary information. Well, we classify with something as supplementary information as well, right? So supplementary information, and then we have the verb paint. Of course, in past tense. Okay, so let's briefly talk about, once again, the two reasons why you would use with in English, right? Okay, so in 영어, English, why would you use with plus some kind of a noun? There are in large two reasons, right? Number one, when you want to indicate company, when someone or something is together with something else or someone else, company. For example, if you want to say, well, I didn't come alone, I came with a friend. That means that we're using with to indicate company. However, you can also use with as a way of indicating means, right? Some kind of a tool, method, or state that enables you to do something. So for example, if I'm going to say, well, I drew this house with this marker, with the marker. I'm not saying I was together with a friend named Marker when I was drawing this house. No, I'm saying the marker was the tool, the means that I used to draw the house. So in other words, if you can change with into using according to the context, then yes, it means that you are using with to indicate means, not company. Okay, so you can imagine what could happen if you use the wrong version, right? Because in Korean, depending on what you want to do, they will be completely different, right? So you can imagine what could happen if you use the wrong version, right? Let's say I wanted to say, I came with a friend. That means I wanted to use with to indicate company. But what if I, of course by mistake, use the means version? Now it sounds like I rode my friend like a horse to get here. I used him to get here. Or I used him as some kind of a portal that enables me to teleport here. So therefore, yes, a lot of misunderstandings can happen, can take place if you use the wrong version. Okay, so always remind yourself, I'm saying with, but why am I saying with? Okay, so in this case, I'm not saying we painted it with someone named the color blue. That's not what we're saying, right? We're saying we painted it using the color blue, using paint in the color blue. Okay, so we're talking about means. Yes, we painted the door, and the tool that we used, well, the means that we used to do so was paint the color blue. Okay, so when you are using with to indicate means, well, how do you do that? Well, first you have to place the noun, right? And you have to take a look into the pronunciation of the noun, right? So if the pronunciation of the noun ends with a consonant minus one exception, the L or R consonant, then you will attach 으로, and 으로 will play the role of with when you're talking about means. But if the pronunciation of the noun ends with a vowel plus one exception, the L or R consonant, then you will attach 로. Okay, so, well, what do we have? Now we went through the color course. Okay, it's for, yeah, we went through the color course for moments like this. Okay, so now in Korean, when you're learning how to use colors, what was the first thing that you have to keep in mind? The fact that in Korean, there are colors that can be nouns and adjectives. However, on the other hand, there are also colors that can only be nouns. Okay, so, and there are yes. So, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, purple. Purple is a color that can only be a noun, right? So it means that I cannot say something like purple hat. I cannot say purple door, purple car, right? Because if I place purple in front of a noun, it means that I'm using it as an attributive adjective. Once again, purple cannot be an adjective. It can only be a noun. So you have to say car of the color purple. Okay, so yes, when you're using a color as a noun, we're going to call it the color something, right? The color brown, the color purple, the color gray, the color orange. Okay, so, and when you are using a color as a noun, the color something, yes, at the end you will see 색, right? Okay, for example, like gray, 회색. Gray can only be a noun. So this is not gray, it's the color gray, a noun. And also, for example, like orange, 주황색. That's why you will always see 색 behind them. Okay, however, blue, on the other hand, is a color that can be both. So it can be a noun, it can be an adjective. Okay, so in this case, why did I use the noun form of it? I did not say just blue, I said the color blue. Why is that? Well, because we're using with. With is a preposition. And what do prepositions do? Like with, as, to, well, they modify nouns. Okay, so that's why I placed the noun version of blue so that I can use it with. Okay, because that's what prepositions do. They modify nouns with, as, for. Okay, so we're going to place the most basic form of blue in its noun form. So 파란색. Okay, so we're not using blue as an adjective, right? We're using it as a noun, the color blue. I'm sorry, the color blue. 파란색. Color blue. And then, yes, because it ends with, the pronunciation ends with a consonant, and it's not the exception, it's not the L or R consonant, I'm going to attach 으로, right? 파란색으로, with blue. And because the G here is no longer at the very end of a word, I will not give it a snappy K sound anymore. It's in front of a vowel. So because it's in front of a vowel, it will get a sound that is a little bit closer to G. Okay, so 파란색으로, with the color blue. Okay, 파란색으로, 파란색으로. And then, yes, when you're saying paint as a verb, not a noun, not when you say, do you have paint? No, when you're saying a verb, something that you did. Yes, we painted it. Okay, so 칠하다, the verb paint. Okay, so now I don't want its display form, do I? I don't want the ta ending. I want its actual form in past tense. So I need the actual form past tense ending, but within the format of honorifics version number 1. Okay, so that ending belongs to inflection route number 1. So let's go to inflection route number 1 to go get it. Okay, so we know exactly what to do, right? The actual form past tense ending in honorifics version number 1 is 씁니다. Double S, 씁니다. Okay, and it belongs to inflection route number 1, so we're going to apply the rules of inflection route number 1. So, what are the rules? The rules are, if you have a display form that ends with the ha syllable, once ta is removed, we're going to apply a 3-step formula, right? Remove ta, change ha into he, and then attach the ending. Okay, so how are we going to say painted within honorifics version number 1? Yes, we're going to remove ta, change ha into he, and then now I can attach the ending, right? Okay, so 칠했습니다. Exactly. So now we have painted in honorifics version number 1. 칠했습니다. 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 So painted. Okay, so now let's actually place it in the 문장. Okay, so, and of course, no H sound in the middle, right? If you see an H sound somewhere in the middle of a sentence, we're going to look at it as practically silent. So I'm not going to say 칠했습니다. I'm going to say 칠했습니다, as if the H is not there at all. Okay? So now we have the whole 문장. 천천히 읽을게요. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. Okay, and one more time. Yes, you cannot speak like this in a real life normal situation, right? The only reason why C can speak in honorifics version number 1 without sounding extremely awkward or poetic is because we know that C is working. So B, the client hired C and his people to come to his house and renovate the place, which includes painting it. Okay, so C is talking to his client as a professional. So that's why we can speak honorifics version number 1, a way of speaking in which your sentences end with 니다 or 니까. Okay. So, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay. So, now, let's take a look at the reason why it was blue. Why blue? Out of all, it could have been gray, it could have been purple, it could have been pink. Let's say, why blue? Let's take a look. There's a specific reason for that. Now, let's say a couple of weeks ago. So, a couple of weeks ago, A and B, for whatever reason, had a conversation with, let's say, a fortune teller or maybe even a shaman. Okay, and this person, this shaman or fortune teller, looked at B and said, I can sense, well, a little bit of bad energy here in your life. And I think it's because you are surrounding yourself too much with the color red. If you change the color red that is surrounding you into blue, well then, yeah, you will be able to fend off, your spiritual energy will be able to fend off this bad energy that is following you around. Okay, so at the time, it seemed like B was just brushing it off, was not really thinking much of it. But, well, maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe B was really thinking about that for the last couple of weeks. Because, yeah, he decided to paint the red door in blue. Okay, so A is going to remember that a couple of weeks ago, and A is going to ask, hey, you really believe that kind of superstition? Okay, so let's say A is going to call it superstition. So, once again, now, I'm not saying that believing in something spiritual is ridiculous. No, that's not my opinion. This is just a scenario as material. Okay, so this is A's personal opinion. It's not mine. Okay, so now you really believe that kind of superstition or believe in that kind of superstition. So this is how you would say it in Korean. Okay, so we have the adverb really, we have the verb believe, and we have the target of some kind of a verb. What are we believing? That kind of superstition. And once again, when you're placing that kind of, this kind of, some kind of, what kind of in front of a noun, do not separate it when it comes to part of speech, and the order will be exactly the same as well. This kind of comes first and then the noun. I'm sorry, that kind of. Okay, so, well, now, whenever you have that or anything that includes that, it means that you have to pick and choose between two versions, right? Whenever you have the word that or anything that includes that, then you have to pick and choose between a version that has a G that starts with a G or a J, right? So the same with that kind of. There's 그런 and there's 저런. Okay, so which one are we going to use? 그런 or 저런? In this case, which one are we going to use? Petri, thank you. Okay, 그런, are we going to use 그런? Okay, I would say I would use 그런. Why is that? A version that starts with G is used in two cases, right? What are the two cases where a version that starts with G is used? When whatever that is not within sight at all. Okay, yes, not within sight. And number two, when whatever that is significantly closer to the listener than it is to the speaker. Okay, so for example, let's say my friend is wearing a hat, and I'm gonna say, oh, I like that kind of hat. In that case, yes, I'm going to use 그런 because it's closer to the listener. The listener, my friend, is literally wearing the hat. So that hat, that kind of hat, will be closer to the listener than to me, the speaker. Okay, So in that case, I would use 그런. Now in this case, I would use 그런 as well because that kind of superstition, it's not something that we are looking at with our naked eyes. So it's not within sight. So that's why we're going to use 그런. Now 저런, a version that starts with J, is used when whatever that is not significantly closer to the listener, and it's not significantly closer to the speaker either, right? Okay, that was a lot of significantly's. Okay, so in this case, yeah, it has to be within sight. If you're going to use a version that starts with J, it has to be within sight, and then it has to be not significantly closer to the listener and not significantly closer to the speaker either. Okay? Does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Oh, I think I said significantly about 15 times, right? Okay. But right now, it's not even within sight. So therefore, we're going to use 그런. Okay? Of course, there are other ways of saying that kind of, but other ways of saying it will be either usually poetic or always poetic. Okay, and then superstition. 미신. 미신. So altogether, 그런 미신. Okay, so now we have the object. Now I can move on, and usually I will move on, right? So now, but in this case, I'm going to give it an object particle. Am I going to give it an object particle just because it is the object? Of course not. Using subject and object particles for no specific reason is what you do in poetic Korean. So you're playing a completely different game, right? We're not speaking poetic Korean, we're speaking spoken Korean. So it's like playing baseball and basketball. The only thing that we have in common is that we have a ball. The only thing that we have in common is that we're using Korean words. So what you do with the ball, what you do with the Korean words, now rules apply differently. Okay, so in textbook poetic Korean, I can just give it an object particle just because I have an object. But in spoken Korean, I need to have a very specific reason, right? One of the 5 for me to use a subject or object particle. Let's say I'm going to use an object particle for reason number 2 right now, to imbue the nuance of frustration or surprise. Okay, so let's say now B made a couple of questionable decisions because of, let's say, superstition. So let's say someone, let's say last year, told B, hey, you have, let's say, for whatever reason, let's say like too much money in your bank account, and that's inviting a lot of negative spiritual energy into your life. So you have to get rid of your money. Maybe give it to me. Okay, so yes, a lot of superstitious things had led B to make some questionable decisions. So at this point, let's say A is very frustrated. Hey, stop doing that. Okay, so therefore, A is going to say, come on, you're doing it again. Don't you remember that you were scammed last year? Okay, so you're believing that again. Come on. So that's why A is going to use an object particle to imbue the nuance of frustration. Okay, so now we have, yes, 그런 미신을. Okay, so now this addition of this syllable, the object particle, imbued the nuance of a little bit of frustration. Okay, so, well, we don't know. It could be very, very, very aggressive frustration, or it can be just a little bit of a casual frustration. But anyway, there is automatically now the nuance of frustration imbued into this word, and by extension, the whole sentence. Okay, and then now, yes, the adverb really. We talked about this a couple of days, right? So you have to know at least 5 versions of reallys. Now, out of all of them, 진짜 would be always the safest bet if you are playing the game called spoken Korean. Now, if you're going to change the game, now we have a different story. But anyway, okay. So, what is usually the one that is also taught? There's 정말, right? Now, of course, of course, I cannot speak for everyone because there are some people who do speak in a very unique way. Okay, and also there's something called culture, right? Even not I'm not just talking about like a cultural region like East Asia or something like that, but even in like small groups. Yeah, we talk like this. Yeah, this group of friends tend to speak like this. Of course, there can be some unique cultures every now and then, like customs. However, usually, yes, usually, 정말 is not really used as often as 진짜 in spoken Korean because 정말 can either sound in 3 ways. Number one, it could make you just sound flat out poetic. So it's more so used in poetic Korean. In poetic Korean, you won't really see 진짜 that often. You would see 정말 much more often. Number two, it makes you automatically give off that customer service nuance, which is not bad. I'm not saying that it's bad, but if you don't speak to people like customer service in your ordinary normal life, then don't, of course, then that's not the nuance that you want to give off. So what I mean by customer service, like when someone answers the phone and says, "Hello, how can we help you today?" That's not something bad. It's actually professional. Good, if anything. But if that's not how you talk in your just normal, ordinary situations, then don't do it then. Okay, and number three, it could sound like you are an adult trying to be extra, extra, extra soft spoken because you're talking to a little child. Okay, so like when you're reading them a book, Santa Claus came with a lot of presents. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so it's a nuance difference. So therefore, if you're not necessarily trying to do one of those three, I'm trying to sound poetic. I'm trying to be extra, extra, extra soft spoken because I'm talking to a little child. Or I'm trying to give off that customer service nuance. If you're not trying to do any of the three, then 진짜 would usually be the best bet. Okay, and then believe. 믿다, a version of believe, 믿다. Now, yes, I do have the display form of believe, but I cannot use a display form. I cannot use the 다 ending. I need its actual form, present tense ending, right? The 요 ending. So let's go get the 요 ending from inflection route number 1. Okay, so now we need the 요 ending, and the 요 ending belongs to inflection route number 1, right? Okay, so let's apply the rules of inflection route number 1 then. What are the rules? Usually, 보통, if you have a display form that ends with the D consonant once 다 is removed, which we have right now, you will apply usually a 3-step formula, right? Usually. Remove 다, place a or all, and then attach the ending. Okay, but for now, of course, there are more, but if your goal is not to become some kind of a profound linguist, now for now you are pretty much safe with 4. If I have one of the 4 exceptions, then I have to apply a 4-step formula, right? Remove 다, change D into an L or R, and then attach a or all, and then attach the ending. Okay, so is 믿다 one of the 4 exceptions or not? Because if it is, I have to apply a 4-step formula. If it's not, I'm going to go back to the 3-step formula. Okay, so is it one of the 4 exceptions or not? Okay, yes, it is not. It's not one of the 4 exceptions, so I will not be applying the 4-step formula here. Okay, so if you go to my TikTok bio, you will see a PDF file that lays out all the rules that altogether constitute inflection route number 1 and 2. So you have to meticulously understand and study inflection because you never know which word you will use with which ending. So we as people, of course, naturally over time develop something called a comfort zone, right? So even within inflection, usually people tend to develop a comfort zone. I'm pretty good at this situation, but not so much in that situation. So once again, yes, it is going to be annoying and painful, but inflection, you have to be studying meticulously all parts of it. Okay, so yes, 믿다 is not one of the 4 exceptions. Therefore, I will apply a 3-step formula. The 3-step formula. Now, of course, if we are using an ending that belongs to inflection route number 2, then of course it will also be different, right? It's not going to be a or all, right? But we are in inflection route number 1. So, yes, the rules are in inflection route number 1, if you have a display form that ends with D and it's not one of the exceptions, then apply the 3-step formula. So it's not going to be a, right? It's going to be all, and then attach the ending. So 믿어요, 믿어요. So now we have the actual form, present tense of believe, which is believe. Okay. Thank you for the 꽃, flower. Thank you. Flowers. So okay, now we have pretty much the whole 문장, don't we? Okay, believe or believe in. Okay, so now let's place a 물음표 at the end. And now we have the whole 문장. So 천천히 읽을게요. I will read it slowly. 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay, now let's move on. So, let's take a look into what B has to say. Is this really the reason why B is changing the color of his door? Because someone told him that, hey, you have too much red in your surroundings. That's inviting some negative spiritual energy. So, is that really the reason why B is changing the color of his front door from red to blue? Well, let's figure that out. Okay, so B. Well, we don't know, but I think he is. I think that is the reason. However, at least on the surface level, what B is going to say is, I was thinking of. So B is not going to actually give us a flat out yes, but it does sound like yes, it did factor in. I was thinking of changing it. Let's just call it it. Of course, we're talking about the color of the front door, right? Anyway. Okay, so of course B is talking about I and no it. Okay, so we're going to take the verb change and we're going to give it an ending which will play the role of was thinking of ing all at the same time. Okay, so a lot of times, well, especially recently, this is what I always say, right? Don't let all the fluff confuse you into thinking that you have a whole bunch of parts of speech. You know, usually if you really understand the mechanism, yes, you do have a whole bunch of words, but usually you can take them all into the same part of speech. In this case, the verb position was thinking of changing, and we have the adverb anyway. Okay, so first let's talk about anyway. You at least have to know 4 versions, right? Okay, so yeah, we know which version to use, don't we? So you have 어차피, and on the other side you have 아무튼, 어쨌든, 하여튼. Okay, so we know which version to use, right? 어차피 is used when you are indicating that something does not change even if the circumstances change. So in this case, yeah, I need 어차피 because that's what I'm doing by saying anyway. I'm saying that something does not change even if the circumstances change. Because what B is saying, yes, we did talk to this shaman a couple of weeks ago, and this person told me that I have to change red into blue. Okay, so that, let's say that didn't happen. Let's just say that the circumstances changed. Let's say I never had that conversation with the shaman. So circumstances can change. Yeah, whether I had the conversation with the shaman or I didn't, yeah, those circumstances can change, but what does not change is, yeah, I was thinking about changing the color of the front door. So even if I didn't have the conversation with the shaman, even if the circumstances change, I would have painted the door blue. So that does not change. So therefore, yes, I need 어차피. But that's not the only reason why you would use anyway in English, right? In English, you can also use anyway when you're simply trying to change or end the subject, the topic of the conversation, right? When you're trying to do something like, okay, well, anyway, well, thank you for today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so in that case, I'm not indicating that something does not change even if the circumstances change. I'm just simply trying to end or change the topic. So after, let's say, having a conversation, I can say, okay, well, anyway, thank you, thank you. Okay, this was a very productive conversation. So yeah, I'll see you next time. So in that case, you have to use either 아무튼, 어쨌든, or 하여튼. Okay, so now which one are you going to use? Well, there are three reasons why there are synonyms usually, right? Number one, when they are all similar but there's a functional difference. Number two, when they are all similar and they have a nuance difference. And number three, when it literally just comes down to habit. You just like saying it that way, well, I just like saying it this way. So yes, in this case, it's reason number three, right? So it means that if you are going to use anyway, simply to change or end the topic of the conversation, yeah, you can just pick one and use whichever one you want. However, you still have to be aware of all three because you never know which version the person you're talking to will use. Okay, so does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay. So now these are the big four. These are the big four. However, now I said big four doesn't mean that they're all, yeah, these are all the versions that exist. Of course not. So sometimes you do also run into people who like using the long versions, right? Yeah, sometimes you just run into people who just have the habit of attaching kane behind all three. So once again, why do you use the long version and why do some use the short version? It literally just comes down to habit. So I can say 아무튼 간에 or I can just say 아무튼. I can say 어쨌든 간에 or I can say 어쨌든 and I can say 하여튼 간에 and I can say 하여튼. Okay, so it does not change the function and it does not change the nuance either. It just literally comes down to what habit I have. Okay, so right now, we need 어차피, the version of anyway that you use when you are indicating that something does not change even if the circumstances change. Okay, 어차피. Okay, 어차피. And then let's talk about why I'm going to, yes, look at was thinking of changing all as the verb. Now, this is not the first time that we're using this ending, but we didn't use it that 자주 and that often. But it is very, very useful. 되게, very, and then 유용하다. Useful, the adjective useful. But of course, I can't use the display form. I can't use the 다 ending, so I'm going to inflect it into its actual form, present tense, right? Okay, so this ending, 되게 유용해요. It's very useful. Okay, so now this ending belongs to inflection route number 2. So let's go to inflection route number 2 to go get it. So the ending that I'm going to use is going to play the role of thinking of verb ing. Sorry. So 려고 하다. 려고 하다. This ending will once again play the role of thinking of. It has the nuance of thinking of verb ing at the same time. 려고 하다. So why is it used so often? It will be used very often. 되게 자주. Okay, because now a lot of times people will say, I'm thinking of doing this or that. When, yes, they are talking about their plan, their intent, but it's not as resolute or definitive as saying will. So if I'm going to say, I will go skiing this winter, versus, I'm thinking of going skiing this winter. So yes, in both cases, I am talking about plan, intent. However, compared to will, it's much less resolute and definite, right? So it gives off the nuance that, yeah, let's see what happens. Right now, yeah, that those are my plans, but I'm not saying that it will happen no matter what. Okay, so that's why it will be used very, very often. Does that make sense? Does the nuance make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay, so if you want to talk about your plan and your will or your intent, but you don't want to go as far as saying, I will do it, this will be the case, then this could be a very good ending that you can use. Okay. So it belongs to inflection route number 2. So we're going to apply the rules of inflection route number 2. So let's take a look at change. Well, first of all, we have to talk about change a little bit, right? Some of you sparkles who have been attending these lives would already be guessing what I'm about to talk about. So, verbs. They can be divided into 2 categories, right? You have intransitive verbs and you have transitive verbs. Okay, so what are intransitive verbs? Well, to overly simplify it, they are verbs that modify, in English that is, a word to its left, the subject in other words. For example, go is a very good example of an intransitive verb, right? I can say, I go. I go to that place often. Okay, so who's going? I. So go can only talk about the subject, a word to its left. I can't say I go him, right? Maybe I can say I can make him go. I make him go. Or, yeah, he goes because of me. But anyway, when you're using go to indicate that someone is going, that someone will be the subject. It cannot be the object. Okay, so those are intransitive verbs. But what about send? So what if I didn't want to go? So I'm going to send someone else. Now I can use the verb send as now a transitive verb, a verb that modifies a word to its right, the object. So This time, I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna send him. So I sent him. So this time, who was sent? Now, who traveled? In this case, I traveled. So go talked about me, the subject, because it's an intransitive verb. This time, who traveled? He traveled. So therefore, sent talked about him, the object, because it's a transitive verb. Okay, so these are transitive verbs. These are intransitive verbs. Okay, so whenever we talk about a grammatical concept like this, there could be a question, right? Which is, why do we have to study this? Aren't we learning boring rules just for the sake of learning boring rules? Well, no, right? Because it becomes very important when you have a verb that can do both, right? Ambitransitive verbs. If you run into an ambitransitive verb, it becomes even more important because you have to know in Korean which version you're going to use. So an ambitransitive verb, once again, is a verb that can do both. For example, change. I can say the date changed. So I can use change to talk about the subject, the date, to its left. But I can say I changed the date. So in this case, yeah, what changed? Yeah, the date, but now it came after the verb to its right because it's the object. So I can also use change as a transitive verb. So change is a very good example of an ambitransitive verb. In Korean, it means you have to know both versions. What does change look like when it's modifying the subject, and what does change look like when it's modifying the object? So if it's modifying the subject, then it's 바뀌다. And if it's modifying the object, then it's 바꾸다. Okay, so yes, this is why you have to be very aware of whether you are using an ambitransitive verb. And if you are, which version are you going to use? Because is change the only ambitransitive verb? Of course not. There are a whole bunch. Change, hide, move, boil, dry, melt. Okay, and also, what is a good example of what can happen if you use the wrong version? Well, freeze. Let's say I wanted to say the river froze because it's winter. The river froze. So I should have used the intransitive version of it. But what if I use the transitive version? Now it sounds like I'm saying I froze the river. So people would say, are you God? How can you freeze the river? Okay, so that's why it is very important. So right now, we have an ambitransitive verb in change, which means that I have to know which version I need right now. Okay, so now, what are we changing? Now I, the subject, will change it, the color of the front door. So I'm talking about a word to its right. Change the verb to its right. What is going to change? It is going to change the color of the front door. So the verb is talking about a word to its right. So it's a transitive verb. So we need 바꾸다 instead of 바뀌다. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay. So now we have the word that we need. Well, the good news is, yeah, we get a free pass, right? What does that mean? The rules of inflection route number 2. The rules are, if you have a display form that ends with a vowel, any kind of a vowel, you get a free pass. What does a free pass mean? All you have to do is remove 다 and then immediately attach the ending. Okay, so 바꾸려고 하다. 바꾸려고 하다. So now I have thinking of changing. But why did I give you 다? If something ends with 다, it means that it's a display form, right? A form that can only be displayed on the dictionary and cannot be actually used in real life conversations. Well, why did I give you the display form of the ending? Because we're going to inflect it again. Why is that? Because first I gave change the thinking of ing ending. This ending can play the role of thinking of ing. I'm thinking of going. I'm thinking of buying it. I'm thinking of meeting him, whatever. But I also have to give it a second ending, right? Because I need the past tense ending. So therefore, because we're saying I was thinking of. So I have thinking of changing, but let's give it the past tense ending. And the past tense ending now belongs to inflection route number 1, right? So let's take this and go to inflection route number 1. I'm sorry. Okay, so what do we have? We have 바꾸려고 하다. We have the display form of thinking of changing. Okay, but because it still ends with ta, it means that I cannot actually use it in a sentence. But good, because I'm not going to end with ta anyway. I need an extra ending. Exactly. So now, because we are in inflection route number 1, because of the soyo ending, the past tense ending, yes, I'm going to apply the rules of inflection route number 1. What are the rules? The rules are, if the display form that you are using ends with the ha syllable, once ta is removed, you apply a 3-step formula, right? Exactly. Remove ta, change ha into he, and then attach the ending. So 바꾸려고 했어요. 바꾸려고 했어요. 바꾸려고 했어요. 바꾸려고 했어요. Okay, so now we have was thinking of changing. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? So was thinking of changing. Okay. So 어차피, now we have the whole 문장 then. So once again, inflection is everything. As you can see, nothing works without inflection. In other words, conjugation, but I choose not to use the term conjugation, right? But anyway, so always you have to dedicate most of your time to inflection. So if you go to my TikTok bio, you will see PDF files that lay out all the rules of inflection route number 1 and 2. Sorry. Okay. So now we have the whole 문장 바꾸려고 했어요. So was, I needed past tense, and then I used the thinking of verb ing ending. Changing. Okay, so now we have the whole 문장 천천히 읽을게요. So 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요. 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요. 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요. I was thinking of changing it anyway. Okay, so now one more thing. This is more of an update. So yeah, because we are on level 4 out of 10, we are a lot of times inflecting something twice. And so we're taking a word, a verb or adjective, and sometimes we're giving it 2 endings and sometimes even 3, right? So now some of you have been asking questions, right? So when I'm doing that, I'm sorry, TikTok is asking me to verify that I'm not a robot. Okay. So now have been asking, well, how do I know the order of the endings when I'm using 2 or 3 endings at the same time? Okay, so my original plan was I was going to go through inflection courses again. For inflection route number 1 and a course for inflection route number 2, but but an advanced version of them so that we can talk about using multiple endings at the same time. Yeah, and knowing which ones come first. But now I'm not saying that I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry for changing my words, but I was thinking about going through the number course one more time because we went through the color course and all of the whole color course is available on the YouTube channel, right? So I just took the TikTok videos here, the replays of these lives that we went through throughout the color course, and I posted them as videos on the YouTube channel so that you can go to the YouTube channel and study review anytime you want. But the number course, yes, we did go through the number course, but I did not do that because back then my plan was I was going to film it again by myself. But I think it would be more efficient to just go through the number course again and use those lives as material so that I can just make them into videos and post them on the YouTube channel right away. Okay, would that be okay? So I hope it is with all of you. Okay. So yes, because the number course, things when it comes to using numbers can could have gotten a little bit blurry too, right? Okay, so yeah, we'll go through the number course first again, and then we'll go to the inflection course's advanced versions. Okay, but because I'm going to delay the advanced inflection courses, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a tip to know which endings come first. Of course, what do I always say? There's always going to be if, ands, and buts. So you do this if you are under this condition, but you can do this if you are in this situation, and you also have to keep this in mind. Okay, so now there will be, of course, if, ands, or buts. That's why I need a whole course to explain all the details when it comes to knowing which ending comes first. But because I'm going to delay it, I'm going to give you at least a trick, a little bit of a trick to know which endings come first. So out of all the endings that we use here, of course, this is tailored to my curriculum. So out of all the endings that we use, let's just place let's say a couple of them, for example, like the want to ending, 고 싶어요. And the past tense ending, 써요. And let's say 잖아요. The ending that imbues the nuance of, I am saying something that you already know as well, or at least you should know as well. Okay, so these are examples of endings, right? So, well, I already showed you the blueprint. So, when you're using, we will talk about when we use 4 endings, but that doesn't really happen that often. Okay, so we're going to talk about when we have 3 endings. So, now usually, of course, there are going to be exceptions and if, ands, or buts. But usually this is how you decide the order. If you have an ending that has 2 parts, right now, yes, it's spaced out, right? 고 싶어요. So there are a lot of endings that we use that are like this, right? Like have to. 야, 돼요. What's another one? Let's say like okay to. 도 돼요. Okay, so endings that we use that have 2 parts. So they're not one, they're spaced out. So they come first usually. And then come the tense endings. So 2 parts. The 2-part endings come first, and then the tense endings come second, and then anything other than that, they come last. So 잖아요, yes, it's just 1 part, and it's not a tense ending either, so it's something that is other than those 2. So this is usually the structure that you will follow when you have to use 2 or 3 endings at the same time. So for example, if I'm gonna say, talk to my friend, and let's say I bought him like a bike as a present. So I bought him a bike and he said, "Oh my God, I mean, I'm grateful, I appreciate it, but I didn't want you to spend money for me. Come on, yeah, I was okay without the bike. You didn't have to do this for me. I appreciate it though. So I'm going to say, come on, be honest. You wanted to buy it. Come on. So I'm going to take 사다. I need three endings, right? I first need the want to ending. I also need the past tense ending because I'm saying you wanted to buy it. Wanted to buy it. And then I'm going to imbue the nuance of, hey, you know this as well. Hey, you wanted the bike. And I'm saying something that you already know as well. So I need the nuance ending as well. So that's why this is going to be the order. An ending that has two parts come first, and then a tense ending, and then anything other than that. So that's what tells me which endings come first. I need the want to ending first. 고 싶어요. But once again, yeah, we're going to stop here. The display form of the want to ending, 고 싶다. So I'm going to once again inflect it so that I can give it the tense ending. 싶었어요. 사고 싶었어요. Wanted to buy. But once again, I'm going to stop here at the double S, right? And then attach the nuance ending. 잖아요. 사고 싶었잖아요. So that's how I'm using three endings and I know exactly which one comes first. An ending that has two parts come first and then a tense ending, whether it's present tense, past tense or one of the future tense endings. And then, yes, anything other than that. This is not an ending that has two parts and it's not a tense ending either. So it comes last. So that's how I know it's 사고 싶었잖아요. Okay, does that make sense? That was a little bit off topic. Okay, but once again, there will be exceptions and there will be more variables. That's why I wanted to wait until we had time for a whole course for it. But because I'm going to delay it, I didn't want you to keep on waiting and waiting and waiting. So I'm going to show you, yes, the foundation that will lead you to be about 95 to 99% of the time correct. Okay. No, thank you. Katie, thanks for the Little Mermaid Under the Sea. Okay, so now we have the whole 대화. So 천천히 읽을게요. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요. Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot to write anyway here. Okay, but anyway, with more 속도, speed. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요. With extra 속도. 파란색으로 칠했습니다. 그런 미신을 진짜 믿어요? 어차피 바꾸려고 했어요.